We'll call this special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Will everybody stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, today, our agenda has 2 items, and hopefully we can get through those fairly quickly so people can meet other obligations. This is a special meeting. A regular meeting will be next week on Saturday. The first item is discussion, consideration, and possible vote to amend Section 425-2 of the Bethany Beach Town Code to add additional words to the definitions and word usage section. I will read the amended section changes without all the whereas and wherefores. First definition is natural area. That portion of the lot that is dedicated to either trees, grass, flowers, bushes, other plantings, and/or mulched areas. Mulch areas shall be limited to vegetative ground cover only, and not clamshells, decorative stone, or other similar hard materials. The second definition that is before the commission is pervious materials. Materials that permit water to enter the ground by virtue of their porous nature or by their design using spaces in the installation of the material to allow water infiltration. Examples of permitted pervious materials include sand, gravel, shells, and when installed per current industry standards or guidelines, permeable pavers, pervious concrete, and porous asphalt. Are there any questions, changes, or comments from the commission?
I do have.
Yes.
I do have a question. In the natural area, does AstroTurf fit in there, something that is not required, that is forbidden?
Mark or Scott?
I think that synthetic grass would be prohibited, would not be considered natural area.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Susan, do you think we need to? Do you think we need to include that?
I don't think so, because it's talking about, it says what it is, either grass, trees, flowers, so it's not in there as something that's permitted, so I would say no, it's not a natural material.
Okay.
Okay, and when the minutes are typed up, we will note that statement made so we can go with that. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay. If there are no further questions, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the amendment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
That has been approved. Item number 1. Number 2 is discussion, consideration, and possible vote to amend Section 425-27 of the Town of Bethany Beach Town Code addressing ground covering restrictions permitted on residential lots. I will turn this over to Mark, who's done a wonderful job of preparing everything. And Mark, you and John, we appreciate what you've done for us on this. Makes it easy.
Yeah, thank you. So I think specific to this language that's here, C, I could read what is currently pending, and then I guess we could walk through a few options from there and then go back to how that should be amended. Does that sound good? So currently, ground covering permitted on residential lots in all residential districts except for natural areas. all open-air ground covering, including but not limited to new and substantially improved driveways, parking areas, walkways, at-grade decks, and patios shall be of pervious material as defined. Substantially improved shall mean an existing ground covering is to be more than 50% replaced or repaired or resurfaced. Ground covering shall be limited to 45% of the lot area, of which a maximum of 5% of the total lot area can be non-pervious. Brian, can you pull up that first slide? So to try to get into this and put this into a graphic that explained maybe a bit more visually what we were talking about here. This first slide represents the 45% ground coverage number as in the pending language. It's pretty substantial. So everything that's hatched pretty much from the left to the right side of the page, including around the 2,000 square foot footprint. This is representing an interior 5,000 square foot lot, amounts to the 45%. So it's quite a bit of paving or material that can be used as ground coverage, not including landscape or pools or other things that fall outside of that. So I think the first observation for me was that this 45% number is probably too high and needs to be reduced. And so from there, I walked through a few other options. Brian, if you go to the skip maybe 2 forward. That's 35. One more. So this represents 30% coverage. So you can see the walkways, hypothetical walkways around the footprint become a little narrower. There's still opportunity for, say, a drive in the front and off an alley in the back, or whatever those amount to in way of patios or other sort of solutions. This to me, is still probably quite a bit of coverage, but if we're saying that we want to allow, an all-pervious solution and somebody desired this much coverage, I think 30% is probably the right amount for a pervious solution. From there, the next one gets into a 20% coverage. So this is starting to look at a hybrid option where 10% would be pervious, 10% would be non-pervious. You could still see, about a 500 square foot non-pervious option on the right-hand side of the slide. So could, in theory, be a 2-car driveway with entry, walk to a front door, and any additional covering from there out needs to be of a pervious material. And then the last option, the next slide, one up. Yeah, so this is a 15% option. I think in looking at a solution that would be a non-pervious solution, this is demonstrating at a 15% coverage with non-pervious. You still have an opportunity there to to have a concrete drive and a potential small pad somewhere else on the lot with no additional requirement for pervious. So, essentially it increases the amount of green area, landscape area on the lot and minimizes the amount of pervious, but it could still amount to, potentially a driveway size solution. Hearing what feedback we received from, from the audience last time, trying to keep it to a simple solution, not getting into trade-offs and other things like that. It seems like, if we were to consider 3 options with a maximum coverage, an all-pervious option would be, right now what I've drafted is 30%, which is 1,500 square feet. Option 2, which is that hybrid, is 20% max coverage at 1,000 square feet with 10% pervious, 10% non. And option 3 is an all non-pervious solution with a maximum coverage of 15% or 750 square feet. And so I think with that, the only additional item that I drafted here is, in the event that existing conditions potentially exceed the ground coverage or allowable area indicated, or what I have here in this table, an additional coverage is desired, I think we would consider or could consider a professionally developed solution that then takes into account, say, a swale or a garden or sloping. But those sort of things start to get pretty specific to the lot size and what's happening with maybe neighbors, how much side yard you have, or how do you really shed water to a place that's not going to disrupt your neighbors. And I think at that point, those recommendations need to come on behalf of a landscape architect or civil engineer or, someone that can prepare that and prove that the calculations or numbers or, stormwater management will be successful. So I wanted to leave that in there, or, propose putting something in there that would, allow other custom options, but not necessarily require us to indicate what those solutions are here. So just to button this up, and then we could get into questions. I think what it does is it potentially just strikes through a little bit of the language in the initial pending, the pending language to propose these 3 options, and then we'd have to amend that to show those. So happy to answer questions or walk through this in more detail.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Diane?
oh, I do.
Okay.
Mark, on the 30% option, does that leave room for someone to put a small pool in?
Yeah, I mean, you still have, if you max this out, you still in theory have 30% remaining area
Oh, okay.
on the lot. So, you have to get, maybe not necessarily in the way I drafted this here, but I think,
Well, you can move this around.
you can move it around, and if you didn't have the one in the back and your drive in the front was larger, you probably have extra, green area in the back. But
Okay.
the percentages, basically come down to 40% structure coverage, 30% ground coverage, and then 30% for landscape and pools in that
So even
option.
though we're saying it's like all pervious option 1, there's
Right.
still impervious areas?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep,
And
30%.
pools are not counted as lot coverage if they're less than 2 feet above grade under the current code right now. So I don't know how that ties into this exactly. Are you saying that pools would be in that remaining landscape area, that 30% area?
Right.
Okay. But the coping and everything else would be considered pervious or impervious area? Impervious area.
Yeah.
Okay.
John?
Firstly, Mr. Chairman, thank you for including me in, with Mark in the effort here. He did the bulk of the work. We've talked 2 or 3 times, but I appreciate even having my name on it.
You're part of the subcommittee.
Of the options, certainly the 30% coverage is the one that I found most attractive. And particularly like the idea of adding the language on existing conditions and giving the building inspector the latitude to deal with unique situations that come up. And so, Susan, I'd like to ask you if you have a particular view on the 30% versus the other options and the addition of the existing condition language.
I don't. I'm in full agreement with it. The only thing I'm wondering about is if in this chart, there should be pervious, non-pervious, and then pools. because we're, we're not doing, if you allow pools to be in with pervious, I have a concern that it just adds more solid, non-pervious area to any lot that isn't accounted for. So if there was a separate category where it could only be a certain percentage, and limit the size that they can be,
Yeah,
that might be something. Because when you have that, you've got to have a walkway around it, or area. I mean, I guess you could have grass, which nobody wants. But if we put it with landscaping, I think it's just another hard surface that's not being accounted for.
I think we can probably do that. Mr. Chairman, I really, I guess the word would be proud of the fact that as we began to deal with this and issues came up, we have addressed them. The last meeting, we had the engineers come in and give some alternatives and all. And I think if we approve this, it's a recognition of the potential for additional alternatives and all, while still accomplishing what we are trying to do, which is to maintain some natural space, some bioretention areas. That's my favorite word now, since while giving property owners some flexibility in what to do. But if you look around the town, particularly on the ocean side, on the east side, more and more homeowners are trying to get away from having to cut any grass or whatever. And this, I think, allows for homeowners to have choices, but still provides a measure of stormwater management that we're trying to do. And so I would be ready to vote in favor of option one with the 30%, the addition of the pool language that we need on that. But that's my thought, sir.
Okay, Mark, did you jot down some pool language while we're?
I was just looking at some numbers. If we shifted pools just into ground coverage percentage versus being part of landscaping, so if you include a pool, it counts towards your maximum ground coverage amount. Does that solve the same problem? Because essentially then you have to decide if you want to have a pool, you have to reduce you still have a maximum amount of coverage that you could provide. And it keeps it kind of simple.
Yeah, I guess it could go there. I was just thinking of it as a separate entity, because a lot of people don't, I mean, it's very popular right now, but it's not super common. I mean, I'm not gonna see all of town going in and trying to get a pool in. But I was wondering if we added, I like the chart, I like charts like this. If we added just one more and just said pools and spas, and I was running some numbers and just said, okay, if you want a pool, you're limited to that particular item can be only 4% or something, which is 200 square feet. And then that just leaves it separate so that all this other is nice and clean and neat.
Right,
I'm
okay.
concerned with if we do too much with adding it into the non-pervious or pervious, it's going to limit driveways. And some of these houses are required to have
Right.
a whole lot of parking.
yeah, I think I agree with that, that I think this is all really strong, and the only issue I see with option one is that it doesn't have any allowance for pervious area at all, or impervious area at all, right? So it's like if you go under option one, all of your paving has to be pervious. But you know, if you had a pool, there's no spot for that. There's no spot for a coping. There's no spot for like a specific. So do we just say 4% sounds like a great number? I think, 200 square feet for a pool or impervious area. And that would just bump that coverage up to 34, which is still a pretty significant reduction from where we were before. And you might not even need that option. You might not even need the subcategory of pool for like option 2 or option 3 because they already have allowances for impervious area,
Yeah.
right? You could, so you just say only in option 1 do you need that subcategory.
Yeah.
And on the parking thing, I did want to point this out, and I'm not saying it's a negative, but using the example of a 5,000 square foot lot, option 3, all non-pervious, I think our parking requirements, are they 10 by 20? Every spot is 10 feet by 20 feet?
8 by 18.
8 by 18. Okay, so that would get you to 4 parking spots, something like 4 parking spots, right? Do that math real quick.
Right, so they'd have to garage the rest, because some of these, I believe have gone up to 6 parking spaces,
Yeah,
but then, so 2 would have to be inside, so that's not too restrictive.
yeah. I think that's right, and I think it also pushes you towards, if you're building a bigger house, like you're less likely to use the all impervious option. It's like a little nudge towards what we would really rather see is more pervious paving. Sorry, one other note under that existing conditions, where we say shall make a determination on alternative solutions developed by a civil engineer or landscape architect. I think that should say alternative solutions signed and sealed by a registered professional civil engineer or landscape architect. So it's not just, you can't just say, oh, my brother's a landscape architect, he developed this, or my sister. You have to actually bring the documentation with you.
That makes sense. So, read that, you want to
Say
read
that
that
again.
again, that you said? It's right down here.
So,
Existing
I'll read the whole thing.
Okay.
Existing conditions, in the event that existing ground coverage exceeds the allowable area indicated in the table above and additional coverage is desired, the building inspector / planning and zoning commission shall review and make a determination on alternative solutions developed by and signed and sealed by a registered professional civil engineer or landscape architect. So to expand on what Mark said about that, that would allow for, say, rain gardens or some other alternative path towards storing your rainwater on your lot, and it would be up to the registered professional there to design a system that could handle the record storm, which is typically like a 1-inch storm, 1-inch rainstorm.
I guess the question I have, should the planning and zoning commission be involved in existing?
Yeah, I wasn't clear. That's kind of why I put both.
I could probably take that out, because if
Yeah.
if I got a package and it was sealed by an engineer, and it could show me how he got to that conclusion, I think
Yeah.
that would
Yeah,
work.
I'd rather
Yeah.
eliminate the delay and.
Yeah, and it could just
Plus,
be.
we don't do that stuff anyway.
Yeah,
right now.
it could be alternative path or something rather than existing conditions.
Well, I think there currently is an appeal process on anything we do, I guess. So they can appeal to the council.
You don't want to try to have a meeting every week?
We don't want to be.
No,
No,
right.
the town council could do that, I guess. Bruce doesn't care because he's leaving.
Come on, look at that smile on
This is
his
good.
face.
Yeah.
That might get rid of the town council. We can't do that. Okay. Any other, John?
Firstly, Mr. Chairman, thank you for taking the Planning and Zoning Commission out. That was my first,
my
going to
job
be
as
my
chairman,
first
right?
comment. But are we now, before we move on this, we've now changed that percentage, right? From 30 to, I want to be sure that I know what we're we're now voting on after the discussion about pools.
I would think we could also maybe footnote that option with similar language to how the original or the pending ordinance says, you know, of which that area can have a maximum of X% non-pervious material. So if we say 4 or we keep the 5, whatever, you know, like to Scott's point, option 1 is the only one that is all pervious. So if that might be the easiest way, and it leaves it up to the
Okay,
up to the homeowner to
just for clarification, we're keeping it at 30%, but with a footnote.
with
With the line,
I think instead of a footnote, we just add one more row to this chart.
Yeah, we could do that.
have pervious,
Okay,
we
one
have
more, okay.
non-pervious, and then just pools / spas. And we have under option 1, we put 4%, because that's typically
Okay.
200 square feet. And then option 2, it just has, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And option 3, it's nothing.
Okay, I like that.
And then it's done.
So to be clear, that would be in addition to the 30%?
Yeah,
So it would be your maximum coverage under option 1 would be 34%,
Right.
A maximum.
30% of it pervious, 4% of it impervious.
right.
And then pools and spas would be
34%, okay.
within the non-pervious sections of option 2 and option 1, or
I
option
just
3.
limited it to just pools and spas, not any kind of other non-pervious. It's just made for,
Yep.
And
that
as
particular.
as a question on process, if somebody was submitting a plan for a pool under option 1, I'm imagining what they would do is count the coping as part of the pool, so that that would be part of their 4%, would be the pool, the spa, and the
Yeah, it's-
surround.
It's not the surround, just the pool, just the particular pool and its coping.
Yeah,
And then if it had walkways around it, it would have to, if it's under the 30%, they would have to be permeable, pervious.
yep.
Perfect.
John,
Just thinking out loud. At our last hearing, we had a property owner who came, but they wanted an impervious surface for their driveway, regardless of when they applied and so forth. Does this option give property owners an opportunity, if it's a unique situation, to have, they wouldn't be able to have a concrete. I'm not making myself clear. I want to be sure that we are leaving, in whatever option we pick, an alternative if there are unique circumstances and people want or need impervious surface in their plan.
I think they would, if they, you know, ideally they would fall into the square footage allocated in option 3 here. So, you know, there's 3 paths. Maybe that should be what, you know, people have 3 paths to consider with what they're trying to do on their lot. So if it was an all impervious, you know, request, it would max out at 750 square feet, or 15%, which is 750 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot. That's, you know, that's their max. If they choose then to pave or put more coverage in, they have to walk through and do the hybrid option to get more. And so that pushes them to have a more sustainable solution. But it's a, you know, it's a combination then.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not a lot of things. I'm certainly not an architect. I'm certainly not a building inspector. I'm not a civil engineer. So as we come down to the finish line here, whatever option the experts on this panel recommend, I will support. I started by saying I was in favor of the 30% option. I'll defer to whatever the experts here say, this is the approach we should take.
Okay. Any more questions from the commissioners?
I just have a couple comments on that. Number one, I want to commend the work that Mark did here, and John, I'll give you credit for it too.
John did all the drafting.
John did all the drafting work. I think what's really nice about this is that there is like you have encouragement or a benefit to going with less pervious or more pervious paving. So you actually get more ground coverage. So it's encouraging people to do what we would like to see happen throughout the town: greener, more beautiful space. That's also much better at handling stormwater and runoff. John, to your direct question, there's actually broad flexibility here, right? So they have the 15% coverage on an R2 lot. That's 1,000 square feet.
Yep.
That's a typical 7,000 square foot lot. That's 1,000 square feet of impervious paving. But in the case that wasn't enough somehow, and a civil engineer or a landscape architect could sign and seal a set of plans that said it was going to handle the rainwater just as effectively, they could choose to spend that money and turn that into the building inspector. And so I think this does all of that, and it addresses Mr. Naughton's, kind of feedback from our last hearing about he can take this to a client and say, no, you have three basic options: 30, 20, 15, and however you want to do it. But if you want an all concrete driveway, you're only going to get 15% of coverage. The last thing I just wanted to note is we've been talking in square footage a lot. It's important to note that this is percentage, so it's not capped at that square footage. It's capped at your percentage.
John?
Apropos of just what we were speaking about, and this is just as a matter of interest. In Thursday's Washington Post local living section, there is an excellent article about small gardens, big vipes, even tiny outdoor spaces can flourish. It's a story on even with a very small amount of open space, some of the things you can do with it. And based on what we've just been talking about, it fits right in with what we're trying to do here.
Is anybody in the audience like to make a comment? Yes, sir. Could you come up to the microphone? I need your name and your address, please.
Tracy Mulligan, 993 Sandbar Court. And I have a comment and maybe two questions. The comment is, I understand the idea of the pervious, non-pervious. Keep the water on the person's lot rather than spreading it out. I think that's the fundamental issue, if I understand it. I support that. My question is, and this is from ignorance, I appreciate all the work and thought that's gone into this, all the comments, so it's an ignorance question. What is the definition of ground covering? I searched in the code just now, just on my phone. And I'm speaking from the standpoint of someone who's, we start demolition on a house addition on Thursday with the permit. We'll pick that up Monday.
It's a personal question.
No. But I'm speaking from the standpoint of trying to interpret this and put it into practice with a builder. So the definition of ground covering, which I have not found in the code, is important to me.
It's not, that's what we're proposing.
Right.
Is to define this, and it says ground covering permitted on residential lots in all residential districts except for natural areas, which has a definition, all open-air ground covering, including but not limited to new and substantially improved driveways, parking areas, walkways, at-grade decks, and patios. Shall not exceed the maximum ground coverage as shown in the table. So we're looking at anything that isn't natural area, that is open to the air. It's not under the house. It's not, you know, your platform for your HVAC. It's whatever is literally on the ground.
Okay.
Tracy, so in other words, your first question, you couldn't find it. This will put a definition, that definition would now become part of our zoning requirements as written there. That has not yet been approved, but that is what, just as Susan just explained, it would be the definition for ground covering, meaning things outside of the footprint of the house and not natural.
Okay. I'm happy. I have a lot of experience with my ignorance. And I'm happy to not
So do
fully
I.
understand it right now and read what Scott was kind enough to show me. And I'll figure it out. I mean, but, you know, I'm sure it's there. I'm sure it's simple. I was just, like, there's a lot coverage definition. It's clear on some of that. This is not clear to me yet. I'm also confused about the percentage that can be on like a concrete driveway. I've heard 5% and 15%, different numbers in here. And I'm sure that will become clear if I look at it further.
Well, just to, what's before us at the moment would be, you'd have, in terms of concrete driveways, you'd have two options. Taking option 2, the hybrid option, you could cover 10% of your lot with concrete and non-pervious. Or in option 3, if you went all non-pervious, you could cover 15% of your lot with concrete.
I get the idea. And I don't need anything more. I wasn't looking for an education session.
Oh, no.
Except I'm looking for where to find stuff further. And thank you again.
I'm not going to speak for everyone else here, but I also have a lot of experience with my own ignorance, so the questions help me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
The chairman has stepped away for a moment. Are there any other members of the public that have questions or comments or observations? Yes, sir. Please go to the podium.
Tim Naughton with Evergreen Homes. I think the three-path method that we're talking about works very well. Like Scott said, it's something that you can go over with a homeowner and give them choices and have them pick something that fits for whatever they're trying to do. There was one small question I had that has come up. When you sit down with homeowners and go through, they're going to start adding features to their lot and reducing this number until they get to the maximum number. So a lot of times we're down to plus or minus 10 feet. It makes a difference. So the question I had, because we've covered everything else that I had a question last week, was air conditioning compressors, which sounds small, but sometimes on these houses you can have 2 or 3 4x4 compressors, and then you're up to 4x4 is 16 times 3 is what 30, 56. You've got a lot of square footage there that we need to know if it's counted or not counted, because when you look at one of those compressors, the rain can fall through them pretty well, and I don't care one way or if it's counted or not counted as pervious. I just think we need to define it, because people will come down for that scrapping for that last 10 or 15 feet, so you need to take a position on that one way or another. And it just comes from, this is what people do. It's a very, very small item. I think this is a good solution because it covers 99% of everything else.
Susan, how do you count those now? Are they not covered?
We don't, really. And they're typically, that's a good question, because they're typically on platforms, so they're elevated above the grade. So they're not considered ground cover in that sense. But we do have a lot of properties, mostly west of Route 1 and south, so it would be Bethany West, Turtle Walk, those things, where they are high enough lots that they could be on the ground. And in that case, they would put a pad under them. So if we count them, that would be part of the non-pervious area. If they then decide, well, I don't have to raise it, but I could put it on a small platform so that it's not, so that water could flow underneath or be collected that way, then it would work that way. So yeah, I would assume that it would include any on-the-ground concrete that you put those on, which they don't tell me about until way after.
Is that a sufficient response to your concern, sir?
Yeah, that would, I would just a definition is fine. Yeah, we can bracket them, you know, and the pervious area under them.
Right.
We can, a lot of times we do have to get them up to a certain elevation. Some people can put them on the roof and completely knock them out of the number, or you can put them on a concrete pad, which is definitely non-pervious.
I think I would consider that non-pervious, and I think just a small platform for them would solve that problem too, so that they wouldn't have to be counted.
Would that create a problem for the architects or for you as far as when you do the plan review? So that one, you know what to tell them, and secondly, you know what to tell your clients when they come in, and maybe point something to, or add something.
Yeah,
'Cause that's what we're trying to avoid.
yeah. In an ideal situation, we have them located on the plans before they go to permit, but
Right.
most of the time it ends up like you're, you know, they're an afterthought and you're kind of figuring it out on the fly. I would also say that most of the time, as Susan pointed out, they are already on a platform. There's very few situations here. And with the freeboard, they're less and less. So I would say that a large majority of them are going to be placed on a platform already, somewhere in the rear yard setback. The only thing I would note is that it's an encouragement for people to put them on a platform. If you say it counts against your coverage, if you don't, I don't know if I have a dog in that hunt, you know?
Well, if they're on a slab, what is that, maybe a 10 or 12 square foot slab that these units are on. On a platform, might be a little bigger because you'll have two
Yeah,
as opposed to one.
It's not huge, and I think to Mr. Naughton's point, you just need to know how to calculate it. So I think the information that Susan gave is enough. I would say that if it became an issue down the road, we could address it down the road. But you're talking about 2 to 4 of these things, 4 on the biggest house, and just go geothermal. Put the units inside your house. Get that tax credit. Save the environment all at the same time.
Okay. John?
Mr. Chairman, to put everything in further context, if I could, as we've been working on this, one approach that was discussed and is not included, and rightfully so, I raised with both Mark and then Susan whether or not we could have different rules depending on what floodplain you were in. In other words, if you were on a high one, could the requirements be lesser than if you were in a different flood zone? And as Susan pointed out to me, I reside in Bethany West, and she said if you look at the flood map for Bethany West, it looks like a piece of Swiss cheese. And she said if we were to go that way, you might be in a high spot, but your neighbor might be in a low spot, and all we would be doing is creating controversy. And so as we've gone through this, I think we have looked at it now from 360 degrees. We've gone all around and looked at all of the various possibilities that have led us to where we potentially are now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Well, I think if we recommend this, we've done a good job of keeping it simple. Thank you, Mark and John, again, and
Thank you,
the
thank
rest
you.
of the commissioners. I will entertain a motion. By the way, for anybody listening, this is not final. It goes to the town council, and they will make the final decision. So anybody who's listening can go to the town council, make their own comments again, or for the first time. This is our recommendation. And the reason we're doing it at a special meeting is not unbeknownst to the commissioners, but we've been holding people up from moving forward, and that's the last thing that any commission wants to do. So we are just trying to get this thing finished ASAP and get it to the council so people can move on with what they want to do. And I appreciate anybody listening who we held up. We do apologize for taking so long, but as John said, we looked at all 360 degrees, I think maybe 420 degrees sometimes. And we've, appreciate your patience on that.
Can I add one note to that?
Yes,
Mike?
sir.
I think it's the town council's intent to review this at the October hearing. I don't think it's going to make it onto the September agenda, but as soon as it's placed on the agenda, it'll be treated as a pending ordinance. And so then permit applications will be able to be reviewed by Susan with this framework in place, which should clear up any existing log jams.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion? Please?
I move the amendments as amended and discussed related to stormwater management.
Any discussion? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. That's it. We finished before 10 o'clock. All our staff people who work 6 days a week now can either go see their grandchildren who they haven't seen, or go to their meetings that